Mystique, History of a Shapeshifter. Little is known about the mysterious past of one of the Marvel Universe's oldest mutants. Raven Darkholme has the mutant ability to become anyone, anytime she pleases. Mystique has constantly battled to save mutants from persecution, using murder, mayhem, and terror as tools. Seen by many as a mutant terrorist, Mystique has battled both beside and against the X-Men. Femme fatale, terrorist, and crusader, Mystique is an ever-changing paradox, with a shadowy agenda and a string of false identities. Let's uncover the true story behind this blue-skinned beauty. Is Mystique really the self-loathing villain we all love to hate? Or is there more to her than meets the eye? Gifted with the ability to look and act like anyone and anything she wishes, her real identity is hidden as deeply as the motives for her sometimes murderous, occasionally self-destructive, and intermittently altruistic actions. But consider this. Perhaps she deliberately employs her chameleon skills as a mechanism to cope with who and what she is, as a way of avoiding the mirror's gaze and help her survive in a hostile world. On the other hand, the path she's taken throughout her long, mysterious, and often mercenary life hasn't been completely devoid of love, heartache, and loss, and has thrown up surprising contradictions, particularly when it comes to motherhood. To say Mystique is a complicated character is a dangerous understatement, and while much of what she's done in the past has been unforgivable, the question remains, what would one expect from a lady whose mutant name was given to her by a demon? Very little is known of Mystique's life until her first meeting with Irene Adler in the late 19th century. Their relationship would go far deeper than friendship, and Destiny's influence on Mystique would extend beyond the grave. In the early part of the 20th century, Mystique operated under a number of guises. It was as Cold War spy Lenai Zorba that she first met Sabretooth. The two had a short affair, which led to her first pregnancy. The child was abandoned. He would grow up to become anti-mutant campaigner Graydon Creed. Sometime later, she married Baron Christian Wagner in Germany. Unfortunately, her husband wasn't fertile, so she big-heartedly tried to give him a baby by going off with lots of different blokes. It was the Baron's friend Azazel, ruler of La Isla Desdemonas, who finally managed to impregnate her. Not surprisingly, Christian was a bit suspicious of the pregnancy. The demonic Azazel had told the newly named Mystique to bring the child up as Christians, but Mystique murdered her husband. Several months later, she gave birth to a blue-skinned, yellow-eyed, fork-tailed bundle of joy. And during the birth, Mystique shifted into her true form. Of course, when the locals spotted the mutant mother and child, they broke out the torches and pitchforks and chased them out of the village. Mystique unceremoniously dumped the baby over a cliff in order to make good her escape. But luckily, his demonic dad teleported him to safety. He would be found and raised by gypsies, who gave him the name Kurt Wagner. The grown-up Kurt would become famous as the X-Man Nightcrawler. Mystique returned to Destiny, and they set up home in Caldecott County, Mississippi, adopting the mutant Rogue and bringing her up as their daughter. It may seem odd that Mystique would do this, especially given her apparent lack of a mothering instinct. It might be explained by her desire to recruit the increasingly powerful young lady into the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. It might not. Regardless, using the identity of Raven Darkholme, Mystique had reached a very nice position in the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, which gave her access to information and weapons. Perhaps Mystique's depth of affection for Rogue can be gauged by her reaction to Destiny's prediction that Carol, Ms. Marvel Danvers, would hurt the young girl. Mystique launched an immediate, all-out attack on Danvers, killing her boyfriend and tricking her into a showdown with Brotherhood members Pyro and Avalanche. They failed, and Miss Marvel discovered the murderous plot. However, Rogue's mother didn't take her along on a mission to kill mutant-hating Senator Robert Kelly, which caused some resentment. Rogue missed out on the fight with the X-Men that ensued, and Mystique's first meeting with her offspring Nightcrawler, who she clearly knew hadn't died when she disposed of him all those years ago. Mystique did manage to get Rogue back on side for a couple of missions. A second attempt to kill Miss Marvel failed, but the successful breakout of Destiny led to the forming of their three-way sisterhood, which helped the Space Knight Rom battle the dire Wraith hybrid. However, there were more wobbles for Mystique's maternal master plan. When Rogue ignored Mars' orders to leave Allison Dazzler Blair alone after an attack on Angel, Raven had to break her daughter out of custody. You can't expect a hugely powerful teenage mutant girl to do everything for her self-loathing psychotic mother tells her to, do you? If Raven was beginning to feel a little happier about herself and life in general, things were about to take a considerable turn for the worse. You see, Rogue had absorbed Ms. Marvel's powers and consciousness during an encounter on the Golden Gate Bridge. This triggered a huge personality crisis in Rogue, and her psyche was overwhelmed by that of Ms. Marvel. It was obvious that her mothers were unable to help, so Destiny told Rogue to ask Professor Xavier for help in removing Ms. Marvel's consciousness from her mind. And Raven lost her daughter when Rogue decided to join Xavier's heroic X-Men. Following this betrayal, Mystique was feeling increasingly threatened by anti-mutant sentiment. As Raven Darkholme, she made a deal with a special assistant to the head of the National Security Council, Valerie Cooper, to provide the services of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants if she could be forgiven for her decades of mercenary actions. "Sure," says Cooper, "no problem. Just go capture Magneto, keep your nose clean, and you've got a deal." So she did, and Freedom Force was born. Her new team had quite a time of it, fighting XFactor and acting as troubleshooters with the X community, but all the time Destiny's predictions had continued to shape Mystique's actions. Mystique fought alongside the X-Men against the adversary to prevent harm to her daughter, but nevertheless witnessed the death of Rogue at the hands of Forge, not knowing that both she and the X-Men were safe. Blaming Forge, her hatred built while Freedom Force were kept busy battling the New Mutants and the Mutant Liberation Front as they fought against the Mutant Registration Act. Events took a second tragic turn when, during the fight against the Reavers, Destiny died at the hands of Legion. Shaken to the core and furious at Forge for abandoning Destiny, Raven took some time out. While she returned to restructure Freedom Force, she never recovered from the loss of her lover. She also flatly refused to believe Destiny's prediction that she and Forge would one day become very close. However, Destiny's influence lived on through her diaries, and Mystique's involvement with Firestar and abortive attempt to recruit her to Freedom Force were foretold. Similarly, Mystique was fully aware of the threat from the Shadow King in the form of possessed Valerie Cooper before it happened. It actually worked to Mystique's advantage when Cooper attempted to kill herself rather than murder Mystique. She took the identity of Valerie to foil the Shadow King's plans, even saving Professor Xavier in the process. This also led Mystique discovering that Rogue and her fellow X-Men hadn't been killed by Forge at all, allowing her a rare moment of tearful happiness with her adoptive daughter. With Freedom Force abandoned and the X-Factor now working for the government, Mystique teamed up with Wolverine to defeat the evil Mojo, after Wolverine had helped her escape the murderous intentions of Spiral. She even got a bed for night at Westchester as a reward. This didn't go down terribly well with almost everybody. It was unanimously decided that she was losing her shiny blue marbles. While the truth of that is debatable, Forge stepped in to help her out, and they became close, with Mystique making an uncharacteristically self-sacrificing gesture when fighting time-travelling mutant menace Fitzroy in order to protect Forge. Perhaps it was surviving Fitz's deadly attack that refocused her thoughts on who and what she was. Revitalized, she moved to France, deciding she should just get on with her life. But her checkered past was catching up with her. Graydon Creed tried to kill both his ma and pa with a bomb implanted in Sabretooth's chest, but luckily he failed. Unsurprisingly, Mystique felt the need to punish her little boy for his naughtiness. She set her sights on his Friends of Humanity group and framed Graydon himself for murder. Naturally, events spiraled out of control when Forge sent Rogue and Nightcrawler to stop her machinations. She taunted Nightcrawler with tidbits of information on his true parentage, accidentally admitting to Kurt that she'd tried to kill him before seemingly plunging to her death before Rogue's very eyes. Needless to say, she wasn't dead. She dedicated her energies to hunting down Legion, seeking revenge for Destiny's murder. Had Nick Fury not teamed up with Valerie Cooper and Forge to stop her, she might have got away with it too. Instead, she received a recorded telepathic message of love from Destiny via Legion. While trying to stay one step ahead of XFactor, Forge and Valerie Cooper finally got their hands on Mystique after she'd been attacked by a mysterious hound during a mission to save the Belforoche Dam. The government plotted to destroy it and pin the blame on mutant militants. Forge recruited her to help rescue Havoc in Japan, but also fitted her with a tracking device, which may have done wonders for her personal insurance, but little for Mystique's opinion of him. To protect his deeply unhappy fellow X-Factor members, Forge also installed a gadget that made it unbearably painful for Mystique to take the form of any X-Man for more than half a minute. Despite their adversarial relationship, the two obviously shared a certain bond. For example, when Mystique was possessed by the adversary, Forge quickly figured out what was going on. That didn't stop Mystique from impersonating Forge for her own ends, despite the considerable pain involved. Adopting his identity, she got a lead on the hound that had attacked her from Valerie Cooper and went to get her revenge on it. Along the way, she also found Sabretooth, who she briefly fought until X-Factor turned up. Polaris killed the hound, which was the creation of, you guessed it, Graydon Creed, would-be king of matricide. Only an attack by Onslaught prevented her from taking revenge on her prodigal son. Dark Beast then turned off her restraining device and offered to free her both and Sabretooth in return for them taking care of Forge. But instead, the gruesome twosome did a runner, faking their death and going after Catalyst instead. Mystique still had unfinished business with Graydon, however, and when his Friends of Humanity bully boys beat Mystique's reality-manipulating protege, Trevor Chase, to a pulp, she went all out to get him. It was quite a job, too. By using a neat time-travelling trick, she got away scot-free, claiming her future self had taken over her body and pulled the trigger on the presidential candidate. The government wanted her locked up, but X-Factor closed ranks. After the kidnapping of young Trevor by the government, Forge helped Mystique free him while X-Factor broke away from government control. This might have led to Mystique finally falling for Forge, but their budding relationship had to wait for one more act of revenge, punishing Sabretooth for his murderous attack on X-Factor. Taking on the persona of Senator Ralph Brickman's wife, Mallory, she got her tracker removed, but killed the doctor who performed the operation, showing she still had her ruthless streak. Keeping up the Brickman facade, she then prevented Rogue from undergoing treatment at the hands of Dr. Aggie and his mutant power neutralizing device. Abandoning her Mrs. Brickman identity, she became involved with Sebastian Shaw's resurrection of Machine Man, and then narrowly avoided being framed for murder by a couple of Skrulls while living as model Ronnie Lake. She had Rogue and Shadowcat to thank for that. She ended up in prison after the High Evolutionary's energy field snapped on, only to be reluctantly abandoned by Rogue in the hour of need. This didn't go down well at all, and shows her growing self-confidence and awareness that she decided to sort out those that had recently threatened her. Loose ends in her life still dangled, and while Prosh recruited her for a vital time-travelling mission, she fulfilled her destiny of killing Graydon Creed, and also learned that Legion killed Destiny through the shock of learning he would cause devastation during the Age of Apocalypse. As it turned out, Prosh was the threat Mystique and others were fighting against, and in order to defeat him and the Stranger, she was physically altered by Procio's regeneration system. Worse, the time travelling affected her mind, and she convinced herself that Senator Kelly must die. She resurrected the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and developed a strain of the legacy virus that would kill all humans instead of mutants. She then launched an attack on Rogue on Muir Island, with both of them getting seriously wounded in the melee. The damage had been done. Moira McTaggart died due to her actions, with both Wolfsbane and Gambit vowing revenge. But soon became clear that Mystique's actions were, once again, directly linked to Destiny's diaries, and this got her off the hook with the Professor, escaping from her prison hospital. She turned her attention on Banshee's X-Corps, posing as Surge, and using them as part of her plan to start a mutant revolution. After she slit Banshee's throat, she was incarcerated by a furious abyss, only to be regurgitated during the battle to free Azazel's island from exile. This allowed Mystique to confirm to Kurt that Azazel was his father, which led to a truce of sorts. But others, plenty of others, had unfinished business with Raven, namely Homeland Security, who captured her with a view to execution. Rescued in the nick of time by Professor Xavier, she gave her simple choice: either carry out dangerous missions on his behalf, or be turned over to the government. She didn't like the thought of having to work with Forge again, or being controlled by the telepathic short pack one bit, and after finishing off her first job, she considered an offer from the Quiet Man, secretly work for him and kill Xavier. Some sleight of hand over the apparent murder of the Professor got her out of the mess with the Quiet Man, who she later killed. But the entire X-Men crew was now after her, leading to Rogue turning her back on her mother, despite Mystique's protestations. Returning to Westchester in the guise of the foxy Fox, she tried to mess things up between Rogue and Gambit, but failed. But Mystique insisted all she wanted was to be closer to her daughter, and become a part of the X-Men. This, understandably so, freaked Nightcrawler out, but after the events of Decimation, Mystique became a fully paid-up member and introduced Pulse to the group, with the two of them playing key roles in Apocalypse's defeat. But is Mystique truly a changed woman, or is it just another elaborate ruse? One thing is certain. Despite her long and complex history, Mystique continues to maintain her indefinable mystique.